Farhan Zaidi with some very interesting comments in an interview on KNBR in which he discussed basically the failures of his roster construction and also the perhaps not so stable job security of manager Gabe Kapler.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes, Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since around this time in 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already. And please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. And coming up on today's show, it is a mailbag edition. We are recording this at night, and so a lot more questions probably will come in. I'm saving a bunch of these. This is gold content, and more are going to be coming in, but we already got like 70 questions. The first round are about this Farhan Zaidi interview on KNBR. Israel asks, did you hear the interview with Farhan on KNBR? And if so, what were your takeaways? And Kevin Kiermaier's biggest fan says, do you think big starting pitcher contracts for free agents are going to be back on the table for the Giants after hearing today's comments? And then there's more questions about this interview that I will get to also after I got to break them down because we got like 6 about the interview itself. So, did I hear the interview? What were my takeaways? Yes, I heard the interview. My biggest takeaway, which we're actually going to discuss later because there are more questions about this. My biggest takeaway was that Farhan Zaidi dodged a question about the basically stability dodged a question about whether Kepler was for sure going to be the manager next year. That was my biggest takeaway. But there were other takeaways as well, and we'll get more into Kepler later. But he did dodge the question. But other than that, just kind of, a lot of it more of the same let me at this point throw in Jay's question, who says, at what point will the media question Farhan on why he says one thing and does another? He says what the fans want to hear and does the exact opposite. So I think that there's some truth to that. Like a lot of this stuff I've heard him say before. Like we had this whole younger and more athletic, blah, blah, blah. I hate that phrase by now. It's worn out. But we had that conversation last offseason, and then they were having it again today in the interview, comparing the Giants to the Diamondbacks. And Zaidi's like, yeah, I totally agree. And he pointed out that they were last by a mile in stolen bases as an example. And it's like, yeah, we want to get better in that area. And we heard that last offseason. And they didn't. And so, yes, that is a fair question. And so I'm questioning, or I'm not personally talking to Farhan Zaidi, but I've noticed a tendency that there is often a tendency to say one thing and do another, which I do not like, obviously, and neither should anybody. My other biggest takeaway relates to some of the other questions about platooning, and that basically he admitted that when your whole kind of roster is built that way, it's not good enough, and you need some anchors and more stability. Also, he said that they were going to go into the offseason focusing on players who would be here a long time, basically seemingly saying that they're going to not be so into these 1 and 2 year deals with opt-outs and such. And so we'll see. There has been a tendency to say one thing and do another, so we'll see. And for Kevin Kiermaier's biggest fans question about our starting pitcher big starting pitcher contracts for free agents back on the table after today's comments? I think so, unless we're hearing one thing and they're going to do another, because the free agent market is very pitcher heavy in terms of the top talent. And so do they break the bank on a pitcher? I think that they maybe should and kind of maybe have to if they really want to dramatically improve their team. And then there's other arguments about, okay, maybe you sign some pitchers and then you trade away some younger pitchers to get some younger position players. That's something that they could do given that they do have money to spend this offseason, as I broke down on yesterday's show. So the next few questions about this interview, Michael says, do you agree with the statement that the lineup needs 2 or more stars to function around the platoon setup? A duo like Matt Olson, Ronald Acuna, or Mookie and Freddie. Do you think that any of the rookies can develop into anything approaching that level? I 100% think that they need a couple stars for the platoon system to work. I have been saying this all along, and then I always point out that's why they have attempted, when these types of impact players are available and the right age, that they have attempted to sign them. Like if you have a Bryce Harper, you're not platooning him, as maybe some of you think that they would, but they wouldn't. They platoon guys because they're guys who have demonstrated a lack of ability to hit the same-handed pitching. And so, but with stars, Ronald Acuna is not getting platooned if he were on the Giants. Buster Posey wasn't platooned in 2021, the 1 year Kepler was managing here. Neither was Brandon Crawford because of how much impact he was providing. And I will just point out, they had that impact duo there in Crawford and Posey and even Belt. So it was like a trio in 2021, and look what the results were. So yeah, and that's why they went after Correa and Judge, and we don't know who else. But I think in 2021, that offseason after 2021, is maybe when they really dropped the ball the most, because there was a lot of star talent and they seemingly just kind of opted for the mindset of let's just bring back as many guys as we can from this season instead of like, okay, we overperformed, let's go out and try to sign Freddie Freeman, for example, who was available, and he ended up getting a modest, $100-something million deal, but he's like a monster. And then the Betts trade, and there are questions about trades later. So I could go on and on. Says, Farhan Zaidi said on KNBR today that while they will defend platooning, he conceded that they need their own version of Mookie and Freddie for it to be absolutely effective. What does this entail to you? Is he going to sign some non-platoon players, trade, or just play the guys we had? Oh, by the way, I don't expecting any of the rookies to become Ronald Acuna or Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman. I mean, those guys just come around rarely. And so do I expect it? No. Do I hope for it? Yes. But I don't expect it, by the way. And so it may have to come through trades this offseason, or Shohei Ohtani is like the one guy maybe you could sign to be that kind of impact lineup presence. But there are some trade candidates this offseason, like legitimate trade candidates who could fit that description. The Frilled Shark says, do you think Farhan's comments indicate the team might be more aggressive at signing Japanese players? I'm not going to attempt to pronounce these names, having not prepared. So-and-so are coming over this season, in addition to, obviously, Ohtani, and they're both pretty good. So the fact is, I don't know anything about like Japanese players, and so I know that there are good ones and that good ones maybe are coming over this offseason, but I don't know anything about them, and so I'm going to have to do my homework. And at this point, I mean, yeah, everything should be on the table to get better, and the lineup needs to get better, the pitching needs to get more like continuity and regular roles, etc. So there were a lot of takeaways, but like I said initially, my main takeaway was that Farhan Zaidi seemingly like totally dodged a question that was basically a softball about, Kapler and him being the manager for sure in 2024. So we will get into what Zaidi said and what I think it means in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by my favorite app, Sleeper. The MLB playoffs are around the corner, which means the clock's ticking on your chance to win 100 times your cash on daily fantasy baseball. Baseball's never been more exciting than it is right now, with studs like Acuna, Betts and Freeman, unfortunately, on the other side of the rivalry, Shohei Ohtani, and even in this final series with the Dodgers, you can pick Giants players as well and simply scroll through all the different players, and you can pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats like home runs, hits, strikeouts, walks, and more for up to a 100 times payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right and you could win big. It's a lot of fun for me because, like, if Austin Slater's going to be leading off today because it's a lefty on the mound, that gives you a little bit of an edge, perhaps, because it's not always factored into the over-under kind of numbers. So anyway, use promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. All right, as promised, more about this. Just more about Gabe Kapler and his job security. Is he going to be the Giants manager beyond the next 3 days? Is a big question. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, on Monday, the season will be over for the San Francisco Giants. They did not make the playoffs. Their season ends on Sunday. The next episode is off season, and that's depressing. But we'll be breaking down a series against the Dodgers, and who knows, maybe some news comes out, maybe big news, about some shakeups. All that stuff can happen quickly sometimes. So, lot to get into on Monday for sure. The Dodgers and the Giants play tonight at 7:15 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So, first question from Daniel on Kepler. Daniel says, today Farhan conducted an interview which has raised questions about Kepler coming back as manager. If he were to be fired, what manager would be a good replacement? So, I feel like my Twitter experience, I've dumbed it down to like using extensions on Firefox and such so that I don't see like trending stuff. I've muted a lot of annoying accounts. And so I don't know if this interview raised a lot of questions, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did, because it was, you should listen to it for yourself. It was somewhat in the middle of the interview, maybe in the middle to the earlier part of the interview. Basically, he was just asked point blank, like, we know that Greg Johnson said that you and Kepler are going to be back in 2024, but can you just like give your thoughts on that and kind of confirm it, basically? And Zaidi was like, I really appreciate the support that ownership gave to us, but then just glossed completely over the subject of Kepler. And like it was teed up for him to say yes. The question was like, and can you confirm like Kepler will be back as the manager? And he just did not answer. And so to me, that is a major indicator that it is a possibility that Gabe Kapler will not be back as manager next year. I think the team is aware of the frustration of the fans, understandably so. And sometimes somebody has to take the fall when things go south. And firing a manager certainly would qualify as somebody taking the fall. And as to the question, what manager would be a good replacement? That's tough because I don't know any of these guys personally, but the wild idea I threw out days ago, because I think Kapler does, Zaidi's called him like an asset to the organization, and I think that he is. And I think that he's got, I view him as like a farm director kind of guy as opposed to a manager, honestly. And, I wouldn't mind them keeping him around, but the idea I proposed was like repositioning Kapler into either a front office role or some kind of role that involves development of players or like picking the coaches, because he's the one who hired Donnie Ecker, Brian Bannister, who also left recently, which is a huge other story. But he is an asset, I think, to the organization. But yeah, so anyway, my crazy idea was reassign Kapler, and the only way you can possibly get Donnie Ecker back at this point is to give him a promotion, and the only promotion that there is on a coaching staff is manager. And so my crazy idea was bring back Donnie Ecker, make him the manager of the San Francisco Giants. Do I know if he would be a good manager? Not really, but I know that he seemingly was elite in terms of a hitting coach, in terms of being a hitting coach, and he could bring in the people he thinks are the best people. So that's my wild idea, but I also don't know a lot of the other candidates, nor do I personally know Donnie Ecker. Okay, SFG commenter says, thoughts on the job security of Gabe Kapler being purely driven by media speculation and angry fans on Twitter, when in reality his job is in zero danger to start the 2024 season. I do not think it's being purely driven by media speculation and angry fans on Twitter. I do not think it is. I do not think he is in zero danger of losing his job after this season. Look no further than the Farhan Zaidi interview. Look no further. I mean, media speculation. We've heard multiple reputable reporters who kind of said clearly that there was dissatisfaction specifically with Kepler. So I don't think. And then we had Greg Johnson saying he will be back. So it is a bit confusing, but I think I've made my point clear. Danny says, is there any evidence to show that Kepler is the one at fault for this season? If anything, seems like the fault lies with the person who put the team together, not the one managing. So I largely agree with this. I think the Giants operate as like a collaboration between the front office and Kepler. It is one of those setups. People call, say like the manager is a puppet for the front office. And I don't like that term, but that's kind of the setup, if you want to say it that way. Although Zaidi and Kepler have both said that they give Kepler a lot of, total kind of freedom to do what he thinks is best. So they do kind of lay off, but they also collaborate. The evidence to show that he's one, I don't really think so. I think if it does largely lie with the players and with the roster construction. However, in terms of the stuff we've heard about maybe the mentality of the team and the Passoy card game that they're more interested in than preparing to face a pitcher, the playing of music after losses, just kind of not rallying the troops and having them have one common goal of just winning. Kepler I view as more of a guy who is more interested in development of individual players rather than a leader of a group. And I really thought Grant Brisbee of The Athletic wrote a very interesting article in The Athletic today about how the one area where Kepler has also maybe failed the most is in inspiring the fans to believe in the team and in him. And I agree with that. I think that he just has not really been able to win people over. And I think that matters to an extent. You want somebody that the fans believe in, and also that the players obviously believe in. And so Kepler's personality, I'm not sure matches with the role of manager. That's my kind of opinion. Let's see where we are time-wise. We've got a few more, and then we're going to switch gears. Go Fishing California. Ben, what's your opinion on Kepler? Should he stay or should he go? I never wanted him when he was hired, but after the 107-win season, I was willing to give him a chance. Over the last 2 years, makes it seem like the team is not ready to play with all the errors and strikeouts. So I don't blame Kepler for the strikeouts, for example. That's, more on the hitting coaches, but he also hires the coaches. I'm sure it's also a collaboration, but it reflects ultimately on the manager. The errors, again, it's not just Kepler, it's the defensive coaches, but he's ultimately the one responsible for them. And my opinion of him, I think I made it clear in the last few questions, which is that I think that I would like him to stick around in some capacity, but I'm not sure he's the best person to be the manager of the San Francisco Giants. And to be honest, I wasn't sure about that all along. And I've got nothing personal against him. It's just a vibe, I just don't feel the vibe of bringing a group together for a common goal and that he inspires that. I could be totally off. I think he's likable in a lot of ways, but maybe not the right one to lead, Okay. The other questions are about who would be his replacement if he was fired. Bay Area GM says, why should the Giants keep Kepler as the manager? I think there is a case to be made that they should keep him and that it mostly is a roster construction thing. And if you put the Braves team or the Dodgers roster and you gave it to Gabe Kapler, you can't really mess that up. And so it's not really his fault in a lot of ways. And you're not anyone who thinks, he would platoon Freddie Freeman or Mookie Betts is completely wrong and has no idea what they're talking about. The Giants just don't have those kinds of players. And again, they have tried to get those kinds of players, but failed. And so if you have some of those guys, if you have Mookie and Freddie and the rest of your roster kind of mix and match like they did, I mean, those guys are giving you 8+ wins apiece, over a replacement level player. And that gets you from 80 wins to well beyond 80 wins, Sometimes that's all it takes. And so that could be the case for why you keep him. He's smart. He understands the modern game, maybe a little too much. Sometimes he's evolved. At times he's gone against the analytical approach and kind of just let things play out more on a personal feel level, with letting Webb throw his complete game or whatever, Alex Cobb with his no-hitter chance and stuff like that. But he's also at times demonstrated a lack of feel for the moment. So, but, he's a young manager. He's only managed a handful of seasons, and a lot of these guys around the league have done it for a decade plus, and so, by the way, there's been some talk that Craig Counsell of the Brewers may leave because he's due for a raise, and the Brewers are kind of a cheap team, and you might think, the Giants are too, but not like that at all. The Brewers are cheaper, and I've always really liked Craig Counsell, but part of the appeal of Counsell is that he's I think he grew up in Wisconsin, a Brewers fan, and played for the Brewers. And also David Stearns, former president of baseball operations for the Brewers, has moved on to the Mets. And so I think that's a more logical fit. If Counsell were to leave Milwaukee, I bet you he would probably end up in New York as opposed to San Francisco. But just another name to throw out there. Coming up in just a minute, trade possibilities. Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Mike Trout. We're talking big names that really realistically may be on the trade block this offseason, and that may be the way. They can actually, in some ways, control their destiny with trades, maybe even more so than with free agents. And these guys are available. What would it take? Is it realistic? All of that coming up in just a minute. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by DoorDash. You love the convenience of getting what you want right to your door, right? With me, I do. I have Dash Pass, and I use DoorDash like pretty much literally every day. But do you need groceries for the week and you don't have the time to go to the store? Try grocery delivery from DoorDash. You'll get everything you want delivered when you need it right to your door. You've trusted DoorDash. I've trusted DoorDash to deliver my restaurant favorites, your restaurant favorites. And now you can get that same convenience and ease with grocery delivery that actually delivers too. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or they'll make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. Do you want even more value? You can save on all your grocery and restaurant favorites with a $0 delivery fee on all eligible orders with a Dash Pass membership. I've had one myself for years and have saved literally thousands of dollars with Dash Pass. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONMLB at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and $0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONMLB. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONMLB for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. All right, as promised, some trade talk, because the offseason is here for the Giants. We got to wait for the playoffs to play out, and then, moves can start being made. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every dayers on Monday. We'll be discussing the season being over and anything that happens over the weekend. We've got young players to watch. Kyle Harrison scheduled to make another start, as are Tristan Beck and Keaton Wynn. So a lot to watch for. I want to see Marco Luciano more. And you're playing the Dodgers. Can they possibly sweep and finish at 500? So much to get into. Giants play the Dodgers tonight, Friday, at 7:15 Pacific. And you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So, getting into the next round of questions. Aaron says, which prospects would you be willing to give up in a Juan Soto trade? I know he's a free agent after next season, but you can't waste another year waiting for him. And so I'm mostly using this question, Aaron, to just inform the listeners that Juan Soto very well could be traded. We have legitimate reports coming out that the Padres are looking to reduce their payroll by about $50 million from where it was this year. And they've got a lot of long-term commitments. Manny Machado signed through 2033, as is Xander Bogaerts. Tatis through 2034. Joe Musgrove through 2027. Yu Darvish 2028. They also extended Jake Cronenworth through 2030. So one of the easy ways to shed a lot of money is the roughly $30 million Juan Soto will be making in his final arbitration year next year. And obviously, I'm sure the Padres would like to have Juan Soto on their team next year, but they could get a good return, obviously, for Juan Soto. So what prospects would I be willing to give up for 1 year of Juan Soto? Gosh, I mean, this reminds me a lot. This is very similar to the Mookie Betts situation. The Dodgers gave up not all that much. They also took on some money as part of that trade. Gave up Jeter Downs, Alex Verdugo, and Connor Wong, and took on like half of David Price's salary. And they got Mookie Betts for 1 year. But the big point here is that they then extended Mookie Betts before the season started for like 13 years. And so if you feel like you have a legitimate shot of extending him, then look, I don't know, man. His defense has really declined. Like the last 2 years have been really bad defensively. He's like if he has a like normal healthy career, he'll go down probably as one of the best hitters ever. That's how good he is offensively. But I do have concerns about the defense. And so when we're talking what prospects, I mean, again, look at the Mookie Betts trade, and it was 1 year of Betts, and he just didn't command that much. Part of it was because the Dodgers took on some money as part of the deal, in addition to the salary that Mookie Betts would be making that year. But I don't know. I'm not giving up Kyle Harrison or Marco Luciano or probably even Luis Matos for 1 year of Juan Soto, especially because he's a Scott Boras client. They are unlikely to do an extension before reaching free agency. And he already turned down a $450-ish million contract extension offer from the Nationals, which I thought was a fair offer. And so he wants more than that, plus the defensive decline we've seen in the last 2 years. That scares me. So Soto may well be traded, and if he is, the Giants should very much be involved, but I'd have to think longer about who exactly I'd be willing to give up. Next question from JT, who says, 1, do you think someone like Mike Trout or Pete Alonso might be made available in a trade this offseason? 2, do you think the Giants have interest in either of them or someone else that might come available? 3, what kind of package would it take to get either? And so again, we are talking about 2 impact players who actually legitimately, I do think, are available in trades. The Angels are probably going to lose Shohei Ohtani, at which point, like, they couldn't win when they had him, and then suddenly they're not going to have him. And I mean, he could re-sign there with that surgery. Maybe he does come back, and then maybe that makes a Trout trade less likely. But let's just say they lose Ohtani, which everyone expects they will. Trout is signed for, we did the math the other day, it's like 7 years, $260 million or something. But he's been hurt a lot in recent years and is not getting any younger. He's already, I think, going to be 32 or 33 next year. I think I'd have to double check, but it would, his contract goes through his late 30s, and so you'd be buying the decline years. However, it's Mike Trout, and so and the Angels have. There was a report that the Angels would be willing to listen on trade offers for Trout if he wanted out, which he very well might, because the Angels couldn't win even with him and Ohtani. Once Ohtani leaves, then what chance do they have? So if he's available, it's the same. It's a very different situation because he's under a significantly larger contract, longer term. He's much older. Soto's like 24 or something. So it's very different, but he's a star player who's a little bit injury prone and showing some signs of decline, but still, I think every Giants fan on earth would embrace a Juan Soto or a Mike Trout trade or a Juan Soto trade. So yeah, the Giants should have interest. Pete Alonso, maybe he makes the most sense of all. He's kind of a blend here in terms of he's not on quite the level of a Juan Soto in terms of like being a $500 million player or whatever, but entering the last year of arbitration, just like Juan Soto, 1 year away from free agency. I don't know like where, I think he's from Florida. Sometimes that matters. He's 20, he's going to be 29 in December, so we're not talking about someone who's a freak like Juan Soto and is only 24 years old. He turns 25 next month. But yeah, Pete Alonso, like rumors have come out, Pete Alonso may very well be available. This is a guy who consistently hits like 40 home runs. 53 in his first year. 2020 we're not even going to count because the season was 60 games. 37 in 2021, 40 in 2022, 46 and counting this year. So, I mean, yeah, you should be interested in Pete Alonso, and the Mets could trade him. They're kind of looking to shuffle things up a little bit. Clearly, they got rid of some of their higher-priced guys like Verlander and Scherzer. They understand like their need to retool a little bit, and an Alonso trade could be a nice balance between like the extremes of what we see with Soto and Trout. But all three of those guys the Giants should pursue and are, I think, somewhat realistic targets, given the Giants know they need to make drastic changes clearly in order to get to where they want to be. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers on Monday, breaking down a series against the Dodgers and the season being over. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on X, Twitter, at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Enjoy the last 3 days of baseball, Giants baseball, until March. So until then, thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.